All right, let's dive right into this explainer on the Apollo 11 mission. Today, we're unpacking a legendary historical event to see exactly how a seemingly impossible challenge set in the early 1960s resulted in humanity taking its very first footsteps on another world.
Here is our flight plan for today. We'll be looking at the Cold War space race, the crew and their craft, destination Sea of Tranquility, One Giant Leap, and finally, the return and legacy. Let's get into it.
Section 1. The Cold War Space Race. Setting the stakes. To really understand this, we have to look at the incredibly compressed timeline of the space race. Back in 1957, the Soviet Union totally shocked the globe by launching Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite. And they followed that right up in April 1961 by putting Yuri Gagarin into space, making him the first human to orbit the Earth. This early Soviet dominance put immense, undeniable pressure on the United States. It pushed President John F. Kennedy to set an almost unimaginable goal the very next month.
That legendary challenge was crystallized in a famous 1962 speech at Rice University. Kennedy declared, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard." This wasn't just political rhetoric, folks. It injected this deep emotional resonance and a unified purpose into the whole nation, shifting the narrative from a fear of falling behind into a soaring, unified optimism.
Section 2. The crew and their craft, the heroes and their vehicles.
So, looking at the crew, notice that Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin were all on their second spaceflight. NASA absolutely wasn't taking any chances here. They wanted seasoned veterans for this. But what's really fascinating is their dynamic. You might think they were best friends sharing this deep camaraderie, but actually, they described themselves as amiable strangers. They basically forged a strictly professional, highly effective working relationship to get a tremendously difficult job done.
Now, check out the stark contrast between the two main vehicles they relied on. On one side, we have the Columbia, the command module. Named after a giant cannon in a Jules Verne novel, it housed all three astronauts, provided all the power and propulsion for the deep space transit, and was the only part designed to survive the fiery return to Earth. On the flip side, we have the Eagle, the lunar module, named after the U.S. national bird. The Eagle was strictly functional. It was the spindly two-stage lander designed exclusively for the vacuum of space, meant solely to land 2 men on the moon and blast them back up to orbit.
So how do you actually pull this off? Well, NASA chose a daring method called lunar orbit rendezvous. Instead of building one impossibly massive rocket to land and return from the moon completely intact, they used a super complex sequence of splitting up and reuniting in space. The massive Saturn V gets them there, they travel to lunar orbit, the Eagle detaches and descends to the moon, and then only the top half of the Eagle ascends back up to rendezvous and dock with the Columbia. It was a remarkably elegant yet profoundly risky choreography.
Amidst all this cutting-edge, cold technology, there was also profound humanity. In their personal preference kits, which were basically small bags for personal items, Neil Armstrong carried some deeply sentimental pieces. He actually brought a piece of wood and fabric from the Wright brothers' 1903 Flyer, beautifully bridging the past and present of aviation. He also carried a diamond-studded astronaut pin given to him by the widows of the Apollo 1 crew, honoring the astronauts who had tragically lost their lives during a pre-flight test just 2 years prior.
Section 3. Destination Sea of Tranquility, the path to the moon.
Launch day finally arrived on July 16, 1969. Over 1 million spectators gathered to watch the mighty Saturn V roar to life. But while millions gathered in awe, the event also brought earthly realities into sharp focus. Just outside the gates, Reverend Ralph Abernathy led a peaceful protest with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Their goal was to draw attention to poverty and inequality, highlighting a national debate about how such immense resources might be redirected toward solving terrestrial struggles. It's a striking contrast that perfectly captures the complexities of the era. Meanwhile, NASA's focus was laser-targeted on the moon itself. The site selection criteria for the Sea of Tranquility was exceptionally demanding. They needed smooth terrain, clear approach paths, and a free return trajectory just in case something went wrong. But the absolutely crucial point here is that last bullet, a specific sun angle between 7 and 20 degrees. They needed long shadows to give the astronauts depth perception to spot craters during the landing. This strict requirement meant they could literally only launch on one specific day per month. Talk about a tight window.
Section 4. One giant leap. The climax of the mission.
And let me tell you, the landing was anything but simple. As the Eagle descended, the automated targeting was leading them right into a sharp-rimmed crater filled with boulders the size of cars. Armstrong had to take manual override. He manually piloted the Eagle, skimming over the hazardous West Crater and touching down safely in the Sea of Tranquility with precious little fuel to spare. Some estimates suggest they had less than 30 seconds of descent fuel remaining. Truly nail-biting stuff.
Once safely on the ground, you might wonder, why was Neil Armstrong the first one to step out? There was intense public speculation about this so-called first step decision. Ultimately, it came down to two simple things: his status as the mission commander and the cramped physical geometry of the spacecraft's hatch. In full pressurized suits, it was simply more practical for the person on the right side of the cabin to exit first.
And this brings us to what is arguably the emotional peak of the 20th century. Exiting the Eagle, Armstrong stepped onto that powdery lunar surface and delivered these immortal words: "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." It was a moment of pure triumph that completely transcended borders and politics. To really grasp the scale of this achievement, consider this number. An estimated 650 million viewers watched that first step live on television. In the United States alone, that represented 93% of all televisions. This staggering number shows how this single mission paused the entire world, uniting humanity in a shared moment of remarkable scientific and exploratory achievement.
Section 5. The Return and Legacy. Coming home.
Obviously, the return sequence was just as critical as the launch. The top half of the Eagle ascended flawlessly to dock with Michael Collins in the Columbia. After a 3-day transit back to Earth, they splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean on July 24th. But what's really fascinating is that the mission didn't end there. They immediately entered a strict 3-week quarantine. NASA wasn't taking any chances with the unknown, so they basically locked the astronauts away just in case they brought back any extraterrestrial space germs.
The legacy of Apollo 11 isn't just in the history books. It's preserved in some remarkable physical artifacts. Today, you can actually visit the Command Module Columbia at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. The crew also brought back 47.5 pounds of priceless lunar rock and soil, which fundamentally changed our understanding of the moon's geology. Meanwhile, the bottom half of the Eagle, the descent stage, remains exactly where they left it, sitting quietly in the Sea of Tranquility as a silent, eternal monument to human ingenuity.
As we wrap up this explainer and look back at the sheer audacity of 1969, we have to ask ourselves, where will humanity's next giant leap take us? What uncharted frontiers will we conquer next? The Apollo 11 mission proved that when we organize our best energies around a seemingly impossible goal, there is absolutely no limit to how far we can go. Thanks for joining me on this journey, and keep looking up.